there was this famous case going on. So the chairman of that committee used to have to go out and do press conferences telling the world how bad PTI is. So he used to request me to chair the meeting. So I chaired most of the meetings of that committee, which resulted in this law. And so there's a fair bit of input that has gone in here. I'm glad to hear that overall that change has been looked at and considered to be a move in the right direction, that there is a significant improvement of the code. There is an element of that code which is a bit controversial, but I'll come to that. Overall, I'm glad to hear that the report says that it is in line with the modern corporate governance practices, and if I heard it correctly, words to the effect of it's one of the better codes available. So that's good to hear. Now, ball in SEC's court to enforce the code. But before I come to the SEC enforcement part, because that is an issue that needs to be discussed, first some comments on the public sector enterprise governance. So as rightly pointed out, the holding company by itself does nothing to improve governance. So it's just a facilitative tool. But why are corporate governance practices so weak in the public sector? And I've been a member of the board of directors of some of these largest public sector enterprises. I've spent many years on these boards, so I have some idea of how they function. The role of the shareholder is played, or the sole shareholder in some cases, in many cases, the majority shareholder in other cases, is played by a combination of bureaucrats who have no training whatsoever, the vast majority of them, in governing enterprises which are being controlled. At least the senior leadership of the bureaucracy are generalists. Many of them, the pinnacle would be the Federal Secretary, who would come in, spend perhaps several months in a particular ministry. So before they even have a clue of what is happening in the empire sitting under them in these public sector enterprises, it's time for them to go and do something else. And to make matters even more interesting, sitting at least theoretically on top of that bureaucratic structure are a bunch of politicians like me who know even less about corporate governance. So the shareholders' rights are being exercised by people who have no idea what corporate governance is all about. And that's what the attempt of the holding company is, that the shareholders' rights, and the shareholders will continue to be the people of Pakistan, the citizens of Pakistan, are exercised on behalf of the citizens of Pakistan, not by generalist bureaucrats and politicians, but by those who spend their lives running corporations, who know a thing or two about corporate governance. That's the fundamental paradigm shift that we are making. So, okay, so we bring these people in. What's the vision? What will happen once these people are in? Some of the overseas participants may not be able to relate to this, but a slight variation of the Wasim Badami मासूमाना सवाल, इसके कुछ हमारी ख्वाहिशात बहुत मासूमाना हैं. I used to chair the Industries Standing Committee in the National Assembly, and for 4 years I kept on asking, can I get a quarterly report which gives the operating and financial results of the companies controlled by the Ministry of Industries? In 4 years I could not get that information. I remember sitting on the Port Qasim board, and I was totally confused because we had accounts in front of us which needed to be approved. The only problem was those accounts were from 5 years back. So effectively, there is no financial reporting system, there is no financial control system, there is no managerial control systems in a large number of these. There are exceptions to this. Some of the larger ones, like PSO, like OGDC, would have relatively better governance systems. But for many of these enterprises, public sector enterprises, there are effectively no management systems in place. We were reviewing the budget of a particular enterprise the other day, and it came to the cabinet, the questions raised, it got referred back to ECC, then ECC further questions which couldn't be answered, and there was a separate meeting that was being held last week. So we finally got to the root cause of what the problem was. What was so difficult in making a budget for an enterprise of 4 billion rupees of annual turnover? But just to give you a clue of the kind of mistakes which are being made, there was a big gap between the budget for the next year and the opening numbers for the actual numbers at the beginning of the next year. And their answer was that budgets were made 3 months before the year is closed, therefore there is variation. So that happens in just about any organization. But here was the problem. As I said, the annual revenue of that company was 4 billion rupees, which means a quarterly revenue of 1 billion rupees of cash flow, and we're talking gross cash flow, we're talking revenue. The cash starting opening difference was 1 billion rupees. So in a quarter of 1 billion rupees of cash flow, of gross cash flow, the cash estimation of the opening balance was wrong by 1 billion rupees. So we got to the root cause, there was no CFO in the organization. And we probed further. The position is vacant, sir, because the previous incumbent had retired. So we said, okay, when did he retire? A month back, 2 months back, 3 months back? Oh, 9 years back. So there are no governance systems in there. So that is the whole idea, that this holding company will be able to design, just like it happens in any large holding company in Pakistan in the private sector, or is a standard operating procedure for all MNCs operating in the world these days, that the systems are designed centrally, the HR systems, the financial control systems, and then they are disseminated down into the organization. So fundamental operating procedures need to be changed, in addition to business strategy, etc., etc. Some of the other related aspects which need to be looked at, that's a subject for yet another report that the World Bank may want to look at, or maybe the Audit Oversight Board. I can see Mr. Tariq Iqbal Khan sitting there. Maybe these guys can have a crack at it. So how is it that in a well-performing corporate, in a quality company, even in Pakistan, you can run procurement systems which are extremely efficient, where large procurement decisions can happen in a matter of days, and there's virtually no corruption. And the public sector has got these PEPRA rules all designed to curb corruption, where procurement decision takes months to take, and there is massive corruption. So there is a need to revisit that aspect of the governance, because one of the reasons why these organizations don't perform well are the PEPRA rules themselves. So many different aspects that need to be looked at. We just got cabinet approval for a change, and as it happens, I can see Shahbaz Rana there, as it happens in Pakistani journalism, while the system was rotten and World Bank projects were stuck in a pipeline, there was no issue with it. But when we dealt with that issue and we went to the cabinet and we had the procedure changed, and we said, look, World Bank procurement guidelines are probably more effective at stopping corruption than the PEPRA rules, and therefore at least the World Bank or the multilateral related funded projects, we should be allowed to use the multilaterals procurement rules. That has, now that we fixed the problem, now it's made it to the headlines of the newspapers today that the pipeline is blocked. So we need to get to the essence of why governance is not performing, and the code is one aspect of it. But that leads me to the last part, which is when you go into the enforcement of these rules, what the Security and Exchange Commission has to consider is, what's the larger national good here? What is it that we are trying to do for improved performance of the economy as it relates to the corporate sector. That we want to encourage more and more companies to come into the fold of corporatization, they incorporate themselves, and then many of them go on to become listed companies. Because it's important to keep that goal in mind. And then for those companies which are listed to utilize the capital market, to mobilize national savings and allocate those savings into productive assets. So I've got both the chairman of the Stock Exchange here and the chairman of the Security and Exchange Commission here. So we need to get beyond telling us what everybody knows, which is companies are not getting incorporated, that incorporated companies are not listing, those which are listed are more keen to get delisted. It's time to take action. I've said this the other day in Karachi, referring to the central bank, and I'll say it about the Security and Exchange Commission also, and as the frontline regulator, the stock exchange. The problem with, to me as a simpleton, the problem that I can see, one of the problems with these regulators is that they've got people who are very, very bright, intelligent people with massive IQ. So they have the ability to think a lot. So I would appreciate if we dumb down these processes a bit, so for heaven's sakes, decisions get taken, okay? So what is happening, what I'm afraid of here, these may be great governance rules, but the way they get enforced, are we only going to add to the compliance burden of corporations and discourage them even more from coming into the fold of corporatization? Are we going to make it even more discouraging for companies to get listed on the stock exchange? So you have to keep that end result in mind. It's obviously important that institutions be governed, and that's, now I'll go back to what I said in the beginning. Pakistan may have taken the decision we want to make these mandatory. That's a double-edged sword. And if you ask me for my preference, a large part of it should have been left as voluntary compliance, because in the case of listed companies, okay, you can still make a case, okay, this is public money and you have to safeguard them, and obviously there needs to be a higher level of compliance there. But a company which is operating as a sole proprietorship and you want to encourage them to become an incorporated body, all you're trying to do is facilitate them into working better so that they become more productive and are able to contribute more to the economy. That should not be, poor governance should not be a sin for companies like this. And obviously there are some aspects of it. Obviously if you're keeping double accounts, you're cheating on your taxes, that's different. You know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the compliance burden. So please do look at it. Please do not have a system where a service sector company, to quote the number from Elango, has 1,500 regulations to fulfill and has to face 40 agencies which come in to enforce those regulations. And I'll keep a margin for error. At least 39 of those 40 regulators are going to come in with no interest whatsoever in making you comply, but only interested in what rent they can extract from you. So please do look at these systems as well. And if there are systems, there are laws which require changes, if there are executive authority functions which reside with the federal government, which can help you achieve those, we would be happy to help out with that. But just to sum it up, I want to congratulate all those who were involved in the Code of Corporate Governance effort at having put together a code which is better than what we had before.